Welcome to the Cheating Secrets channel. We hope you enjoy today's story.
It was a typical week, and the house was quiet again. My wife Darcy and our twin daughters were, as usual, not at home. I don't think it's unreasonable for a man to expect his family to be home when he returns. It wasn't always like this. Just 6 months ago, I could count on a warm welcome and a hearty dinner. Not anymore. Something has changed, and I'm not sure if it's for the better. Darcy and I have been married for 6 years. We met in college and tied the knot shortly after I graduated. I never had another girlfriend. Darcy was normal in every way, and I felt comfortable being married to her. She had chestnut hair, hazel eyes, a good figure, and a normal bust. She didn't stand out, just blended in with the crowd. Because of this, I never had reason to doubt her fidelity. Maybe that's exactly why I should have doubted. 4 years ago, we were blessed with 2 beautiful twin daughters, Janet and Janice. I loved them dearly, but Darcy, it seems, didn't share my feelings. She didn't like the childbirth experience and insisted I undergo a vasectomy right after. For the first few years, she eagerly awaited my return home so I could look after the twins. Then we met Bill and Emily. Emily Mercer couldn't have children of her own and willingly agreed to babysit whenever needed. Darcy was in high spirits. She could leave the house and go shopping or attend to other personal matters whenever it suited her. I swear, for 3 months, the twins spent more time with Aunt Emily than with their own mother. Quite often, the 4 of them would go out together, but usually Emily would watch over the girls while Darcy ran her errands. Lately, I began to wonder what exactly was bothering Darcy during her pregnancy. It seemed unnecessary to be so often absent to maintain normal household affairs. Overall, I was content with my life. I had a comfortable job, a nice house, a latest model car, and what seemed like a perfect family. Darcy and I would occasionally go out while Bill and Emily looked after the twins. On weekends, the 4 of us would gather to play cards or have a drink at the bar. I liked Bill, and I enjoyed his company. I wasn't sure about Emily, but Darcy seemed to love her. My concern about how my wife spent her free time wasn't deep enough to compel me to investigate further. I just acknowledged it and moved on. It was a dull Tuesday when things became interesting. I parked my BMW in my designated spot at work. I held a high enough position in the food chain to secure a parking space, albeit not a great one. It was at the far end of the lot and on a slope, but better than not having a spot at all. Finding a flat parking spot in our city was rare. Why the city founders chose such hilly terrain for building was beyond me. It always put me at a disadvantage. I had been at work for about an hour when I had to step out for a call. I think that crappy parking spot changed my life. There hadn't been rain for several days, but there was a wet patch on the ground next to my front wheel. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but not today. Tiny, glistening droplets streamed down the asphalt. The liquid had a metallic sheen, and I felt compelled to touch it with my finger. It wasn't water. My BMW was less than a year old, and I couldn't imagine anything being broken. I definitely didn't want to sit in the dust. 20 minutes later, the mechanic was lying on his back, peering under my car. "I'm sorry, Mr. Evans, but I'm going to have to report this to the police," he said. "Report damage to the brake line to the police? I'm sorry, but that doesn't make sense. I'm not an expert in these matters, but this line wasn't severed or disconnected. It was deliberately damaged." "Do you mean it was cut?" "No, it wasn't cut. It looks like it was filed or ground down with something. These things don't happen accidentally with metal brake lines. It was done intentionally. Don't touch anything and let the cops deal with this." How far could I have driven? At most, 2 blocks, and the entire system would have been wrecked. Considering the hills in this city, you would have had to drive damn far and stop uncomfortably. Let's leave it at that and go to the office. I can leave you in peace until the police finish with this. By the time I left work, the BMW wasn't there. I ended the day, using the complimentary rental car, and returned home at the usual time. Darcy was home and seemed surprised to see me. "Hi, honey. Did you have a good day? Where's your car? Why are you behind the wheel of a Ford?" Something seemed suspicious. Why did she decide to stay home today? Was she expecting a phone call? I noticed she wasn't ready with dinner. I got the feeling she wasn't expecting me home at all. Even the twins were there to greet me. The BMW was supposed to undergo a 30,000-mile checkup. They won't be able to do it until tomorrow. "What do we have for dinner?" I don't smell anything, I said. I saw no reason to tell her about the brake line. Darcy hesitated slightly. I thought we could order in tonight and I wanted to wait to find out what you wanted. Pizza sounds great. I'm going upstairs to freshen up. Before I got into the shower, I heard Darcy talking to someone on the phone. Everything was becoming more interesting. The next day at work, I had an early visitor. Robert Evans, I'm Lieutenant Daniel Green. Do you have a minute? Of course. Is this about the car? Daniel Green was a big man, but not fat. He had short cropped hair and metal-framed glasses. Aside from a pinkish scar on his skin, he seemed to exude professionalism. We're done with the car, Mr. Evans, and you can pick it up at the workshop anytime. Your mechanic installed a new brake line while we were there. We have a few questions if you don't mind. Am I suspected of something? No, of course not, but we suspect something suspicious is going on. Have you had any arguments or disagreements with anyone lately? Is anyone angry with you or holding a grudge? Not that I know of. Was the mechanic right? Is someone setting me up? Could I have been killed? Well, Mr. Evans, someone definitely intended to cause you bodily harm and possibly death. It was a purely amateur job, but I don't think you would have been killed, although it's possible. Whoever did this didn't bother to disable your airbags. This car has front and side airbags. If you hadn't been driving at high speed, I don't think you would have died. However, that's not the point. Just because they didn't know what they were doing doesn't mean they weren't trying to kill you. Damn, that's reassuring. I guess if someone's trying to kill you, it's better if they're incompetent. Instead of dying, I could have just ended up disabled for life. Great. What do I do now? Take my business card. If anything comes up, give me a call. And in the meantime, be careful. I'd bet my next paycheck they'll try again. That's damn reassuring. I'll definitely think about this. As he was walking out the door, Lieutenant Green paused and turned around. By the way, how's your family life? I didn't respond, and I don't think he expected me to. Shortly after that, I left work and headed home. The house was empty. We had a small room that served as a kind of office. In it sat our home computer, a desk, and a small cabinet for storing documents. I sat at the desk for a few minutes with a cold face, trying to figure out what to do. It's unsettling, to say the least, to know that someone wants you dead. I'm a good guy. I've never cheated anyone. Why would someone want me dead? I thought my marriage was successful. Darcy never complained about anything. I gave her a beautiful home, a nice car, a stack of credit cards, and 2 wonderful children. What more could she want? Darcy had taken care of all the bills for the house. She had taken care of the checkbook. She paid the utilities, car payments, mortgage, credit card bills, and insurance policies. Insurance? Insurance. On impulse, I pulled out the folder with the insurance policies. Like most young couples, we were dreadfully insured. When you're young, you don't think about the possibility of death. I had a small work insurance policy for $50,000. Besides that, the only insurance I had was the mortgage insurance that Darcy insisted on. If I were to die, the house would pass to her for free. It was cheap because I was still young, so I added it to the mortgage payment. I never looked into the filing cabinet or checkbook. Darcy knew that, and it turned out to be her mistake. She was meticulous. Her bank account was always in order, down to the last penny. She always knew where every folder and receipt was. The mortgage payment included the cost of homeowner's insurance, so there were never receipts for that. My work insurance was deducted from my paycheck. Why were there 2 receipts for $150 each from Republican National Insurance for the same month? I had never dealt with this company, and I didn't know about any of their insurance policies. I put the receipts in my pocket and continued searching. Nothing else unusual turned up. Darcy kept track of everything. It was her obsessive idea. I felt like it was something I shouldn't know about, but she couldn't help herself. She had to keep the payment confirmation to satisfy her obsessive idea. I called the Mercer household. Emily had taken the children, and she said Darcy had gone shopping. She was friendly but evasive. I called Darcy's cell phone, but it was turned off. Interesting. I decided to go grab lunch and then do some investigating. Robert Evans, good to see you here. What can I do for you? The lady at the customer service desk at Republican National Insurance was named Debbie Martin, or at least that's what she was called when we went to high school together. She had her own office, and the nameplate on her desk read D. Reynolds. I remembered her because she was the only girl who ever asked me out on a date. Even though everyone knew Darcy and I were a couple, she still asked, just in case. Of course, I turned her down. Her hair was short and chestnut-colored. She had a good tan, and her makeup was flawless. Well, how are you, Debbie? Haven't seen you since high school, and we live in the same town. I'm fine. Nice to see you again. Sorry to hear about your marriage. Now she really got my attention. What was she sorry to hear about? I had a strong sense that something was going on, and this random comment from a woman I hadn't seen in years only amplified it. I couldn't help but react to what Debbie had just said. She immediately picked up on it. Oh, damn. I'm so damn sorry. Forget I said anything, Bob. I've crossed a line. Sometimes my words just slip out. Debbie stumbled, trying to undo what couldn't be undone. She said it, and I remembered. I finally overcame the awkwardness, asking the question I came to find an answer to. Can you tell me what these receipts are for? She took them from my hands and seemed relieved that I decided not to continue the previous discussion. After a few clicks on the keyboard, she sighed and gave me a pitiful look. Bob, it pains me to say this, but it looks like this reunion is rapidly going downhill, she said. I didn't respond. She pressed a few more keys, then leaned back in her chair. Do you know someone named Philip Chase? No, I can't say I do. Is there a reason I should know him? Debbie reached out and rummaged through a few magazines on the shelf beside her desk. She picked one up and opened it. This is Philip Chase. Have you ever seen him before? Yes, actually, I have. He was at the BBQ bar when my neighbors were throwing a party about 6 months ago. I remember him quite well because it seemed like he was paying too much attention to my wife. I even remember mentioning it to Darcy back then. What does he have to do with me? Debbie got up and closed the door to her office. Returning to her desk, she leaned forward and looked me straight in the eye. Her friendly demeanor turned serious. It was obvious that she didn't want to say what needed to be said. Darcy has been having lunch with Philip Chase a couple of times a week for the past 3 months. Sometimes these were long lunches. Philip dropped a few hints to his colleagues that they planned to get married in the near future. No one else in the company knows Darcy besides me. I knew she was married, and I knew it was to you. That's why I misspoke when I first saw you. I assumed it was something you knew about, and that you were here to settle some insurance matters related to an impending divorce. I apologize for the tactlessness. Do you know this guy? We work in the same building and for the same company. I've always thought he was a jerk and never understood what Darcy saw in him, especially since she had you. The last part of this comment struck me as interesting. What are these receipts for? Technically, you should know. About a month ago, you took out life insurance policies totaling $2.25 million. That was the initial payment for these policies. It's the maximum amount you could get on these policies without a physical exam. Both policies provide double indemnity in case of accidental death. That's $1 million. Judging by your expression, I'm guessing you had no idea about any of this. Just curious. Who was the agent who issued these policies for me? Debbie quickly glanced at the screen. Surprise, surprise. It was your favorite insurance agent, Philip Chase. I suppose I had to sign something at some point? Debbie turned the screen so that we both could see it, then opened both documents. The signature looked like mine, and, surprisingly, it was exactly the same in both places, as if it were a copy or some sort of facsimile. We both sat there looking at each other. She was waiting for me to say something, and I didn't know what to say. Finally, I reached into my coat pocket and handed her Daniel Green's business card. Could you call this guy and explain to him what's going on? I'm afraid if I do it, the trust in you will be lost. Debbie looked at the business card and then back at me. Something else is going on here, isn't it, Bob? Yes, I'm afraid so. As I stood up to leave, she asked one final question. Will I see you again? I pondered this question for a long time. I think in real time it only took a fraction of a second, but it lodged deeper in my consciousness. Professionally or personally? Both. I gestured towards the nameplate on her desk. What about Mr. Reynolds? He's been gone for a long time. We both smiled as I walked out the door. It was still well before noon when I arrived at the empty house. I sank into my comfortable high-backed chair and pondered the situation and how the day had unfolded. It became clear that Darcy had met Philip at the party hosted by the Mercers. How did they know Philip and why did they invite him? How come I never saw him at any events or parties afterward? How did Darcy and Philip get close in such a short time? How close were they? It seemed like at this point there were more questions than answers. I decided to switch to coffee when the doorbell rang. Now things would become a bit clearer. It was a courier envelope addressed to Darcy and marked personal. After a brief argument, the courier allowed me to sign for it. It was one of those envelopes that couldn't be opened without destroying it completely. I sat down at the kitchen table with the envelope and a fresh cup of coffee, a razor blade and a bottle of rubber glue. That's all I needed to solve the problem with the envelope. It was the contents of the envelope that truly worried me. After a quick glance at the legal document, I went to the office, turned on the computer and scanner. 5 minutes later, Detective Green received a copy of the document in his email. I'm sure the information obtained this way didn't meet all the complex legal requirements nowadays, but I simply waited for him to receive the information. The document was full of complex legal terms and came from a law firm located about 100 kilometers from home. It was a legal agreement between William and Emily Mercer regarding the adoption of the twins. Darcy had relinquished all parental rights to the girls and handed them over to the Mercers. Nowhere in the document was my name mentioned or any reference to me at all. It was as if I didn't exist. Now much became clearer. Now I was sure I needed to be a little more careful not to get into an accident. I left Darcy a note saying I needed to leave town for a few days on business. I was confident she would see it because it was placed on top of a specially delivered envelope. I double-checked one last time to make sure there were no signs of it being tampered with. I eagerly awaited a few nights at the motel. Daniel Green was waiting for me when I came to work the next day. He was all smiles. I like it when everything falls into place. Hopefully, I was at least a little helpful. It really helped when we were able to identify the fingerprints we found on the wing of your car. I just wanted to let you know that we plan to summon all 4 individuals for questioning this morning. We don't think Bill Mercer is involved, but we need to question him to be sure. You might want to arrange for someone to stay with your daughters if necessary. My officers can't stand babysitting. I wasn't actually harmed. What can you charge them with? Your wife and Mr. Chase will be charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Emily Mercer will likely be charged as an accessory to the same charge. They won't get much time, but it might save your life. It's important to me and worth the effort. Can your people bring my daughters here, to the office? I don't see a problem with that. About 30 minutes after Detective Green left, Debbie Reynolds appeared in my office. Hi, Bob. I hope you don't mind the unexpected visit. Your police lieutenant thought you might need a babysitter for your girls. I took the rest of the day off, just in case. I also wanted to let you know that you're officially uninsured now. I've canceled 2 of your double indemnity policies. You really should consider additional life insurance. I was glad to see Debbie and welcomed the levity she brought with her. I'm glad you came. The girls probably won't be here for a while, so you can tell me all about the mysterious Mr. Reynolds. The twins didn't show up until an hour later. Debbie had enough time to tell me about her failed marriage. She also told me about several attempts she made to break up Darcy and me when we were still in high school. Of course, I didn't pay attention to any of that, but apparently Darcy knew about her attempts. Debbie got along with the girls even better than Emily. Within minutes, I was completely out of sight. At their age, they were a handful, so I welcomed the help. 2 hours later, Darcy called me. Robert, I'm in trouble. There's been a big mistake, and I need you to come to the police station and bail me out. Bail you out? Bail you out for what? What have you been arrested for? It's complicated, Bob. I'll explain when you get here. Can you come as soon as possible? Listen, Darcy, I seem to be stuck here at the office. I'll call your parents. I'm sure they can help you. No, Bob, don't call my parents. They won't understand. You need to come here. Please, hurry. I didn't respond. Bob, are you there? Bob, what's happening? Are you coming? No, Darcy, I'm not coming. I'll call your parents instead of you. Goodbye. She was still pleading as I hung up the phone. Darcy's parents insisted on knowing why she was in jail, and I repeatedly refused to answer them. Reluctantly, they finally agreed to go get her. I told them to take her back home with them, and I would send her things as soon as possible. I got the feeling they understood it was a domestic issue. Debbie offered to take the girls to Chuck E. Cheese's, and I went home to gather Darcy's belongings. I quickly packed her things and placed the bags and boxes on the porch as they filled up. Just as I finished, Darcy and her parents arrived. Darcy was crying and stayed in the car with her mother while her father and I loaded her things into the trunk. It only took a few minutes. Darcy's father shook my hand and said he and his wife regretted the trouble Darcy had caused. It was brief but sincere. I appreciated it. Philip Chase didn't make bail, but he wasn't absent for too long. Darcy was more than willing to exchange information about his whereabouts for a reduced sentence. Bill Mercer had no idea what Emily and Darcy had planned. He never found out that Emily set Darcy up with Chase. Bill faced no charges. Emily got a 2-year sentence and will likely be out in a year. Bill filed for divorce. Darcy got 3 years for conspiracy to commit murder. She'll probably be out in 2. Apparently, Philip and Darcy were planning to go to Europe with the insurance money and the proceeds from selling the house. Philip got 8 years. My divorce will be final in 2 months. The twins will start school this year and I'll have to hire a full-time nanny. My relationship with Debbie is gradually strengthening. She mentioned she's ready to quit her job and become a full-time mom and wife if I want. I probably should have gone to the prom with her.